Alright, man, welcome back to another reaction. Today we got why nobody could catch the deadliest gunslinger in history. Like always, we're not going to waste any time. We're just going to get right into this one, man.
Hey, 42 here. When you think of the coolest people who ever lived, it's hard to beat the cowboys of the Old West. Pretty much everything about them is
True.
utterly iconic.
Like, the cowboys of the Wild Wild West and, in, like, medieval times, like Rome and all that, right? That's like, the two coolest
Imagine
ages,
spending
I
your
guess you
days
could say.
crossing epic
Quote,
vistas
unquote, cool,
and going
right?
on the hunt for Curly's gold before hitting the local saloon to cheated cards and get into gunfights. All before tipping your 10-gallon hat to the nearest prostitute and clip-clopping away into another perfect sunset. It certainly beats a stressful commute followed by 8 hours of Microsoft Excel.
I mean,
The quintessential Wild West period started at the end of the American Civil War in 1865 and ended with the official closing of the frontier by the US Census Bureau in 1895.
so from 65 to 95, okay.
Though some scholars believe the Wild West was briefly reopened by Will Smith in 1999.
Oh, in the Wild Wild West.
During the
nice.
late 19th century, thousands of settlers were crossing the US.
Oh, yo, hey man, make sure you got something to smoke or something to snack on, nice little snacky, or something to fucking drink. I got me a nice little, hold up, let me just, a nice blueberry motherfucking Rebel, bro. They're terrible for you, right? But they're good for me, all right? If that makes sense. Oh my god.
In search of fortune and glory on the new frontier. It's during this period that we first hear many of the names that still live on in infamy 150 years later, like the legendary hunter and impresario Buffalo Bill, legendary
don't know
lawman
him.
Wyatt Earp,
I don't
and
know
sharpshooter Calamity Jane.
I don't.
But of all the famed folk and felons of the Old West, there was not a fellow more fearsome than James Butler Hickok, a man who so
James Butler
epitomized the
Hickok.
Wild West that he was actually nicknamed Wild Bill.
Wild Bill,
Christmas
huh?
came
Okay.
early this year because I got
This is sick. Yo, I'm fucking with this. Yo, hey, make sure to go get, I think that's Manscaped. Go
milk
get your
and
Manscaped stuff.
potatoes. Bill became an Your jingle balls will thank you. And thanks to Manscaped for sponsoring this video.
It was Manscaped.
Born in 1837 into a household where guns were as normal as milk and potatoes, Bill became an excellent marksman at an early age. He lived with his family on a farm in rural Illinois, a few hours from Chicago. The area was rife with gangs of outlaws, collectively known as prairie bandits. And being good with a six-shooter was an important life skill, no matter how old you were. But whilst an early exposure to guns and ammo was par for the course, the fact that his father, William, was an active abolitionist was rather more unusual. The family home
know
was a
what that means.
station on the so-called Underground Railroad, a network of routes and safe houses used by slaves to escape to states where slavery was illegal. Bill's father was tragically killed because of his stance on abolition when Bill was just
South,
15,
this and north.
and it had a big impact on the young man's life. Both Bill's parents were devout Baptists, and although it seems their religious views didn't quite rub off on their pistol-toting infant, their activism around slavery certainly did. At 18, he moved to what was then called the Kansas Territory to join an anti-slavery vigilante group known as the Jayhawkers.
A
It was there-
vigilante group. Hey, at least they're on the good side. You know what I'm saying? Like,
That he met a cocky 12-year-old scout by the name of William Cody. Though you probably know him as Buffalo Bill, one of the most famous figures from the Old West.
I don't.
Their
know,
paths
but
would
okay.
cross again soon, but not before both had become living legends. The next job on Wild Bill Hickok's Wild West resume was working for a stagecoach company. At the time, driving a horse-drawn coach cross-country was fraught with all kinds of dangers, as Bill would soon discover. In 1860, he was driving from Missouri to New Mexico when he was attacked, not by bandits, but a bear. As occupational hazards go, it wasn't the kind of thing that would typically be covered in the company handbook, and for most of us,
Dude.
it would have meant a grisly end.
A
But not for
grisly
Bill.
end.
Against all odds, he managed to take on 2 tons of ursine aggression and come out on top, killing the bear with his bare hands. Okay, he had a knife too, but the inaccuracy was worth it for the pun. After his unofficial audition
No way you killed the bear with only a knife, dude. I don't believe you. Don't believe it.
for the Revenant, Bill was left badly injured, his chest, shoulder and arm severely crushed, It took him months in bed convalescing
Okay,
before
maybe
he
I
was
did.
well enough to work
I
again.
was about to say, I thought that like he got out of there unscathed and killed the bear. It's like, okay, no
And when
shot,
he
right?
was sent by his employers to a stagecoach station in Rock Creek, Nebraska. And it was there that he sealed his reputation as a man you most certainly did not want to f with. Local landowner David McCannells took a disliking to Bill, giving him the nickname Duck Bill on account of his long nose. I can only assume McCannells didn't know that the man he was mocking had recently kicked 7 shades of out of a bear. McCannells and 2 of his buddies, plus McCannell's 12-year-old son, ambushed Bill Hickok whilst he was working, and things quickly escalated. Exactly what happened next varies depending on
Does
which
Bill
source you
kill 'em all?
read, but the end result is all the same. A gunfight leaves 3 men dead, and Bill very much alive.
Oh my
I should
god,
probably
he
point
did.
out
That's
that the
wild.
12-year-old child was physically unharmed in the melee,
Okay, well that's
deeply
good.
traumatized, but physically unharmed.
Yeah, like
Bill was
who the fuck were we hunting?
acquitted of the murders, as it was
Jesus.
believed he'd acted in self-defense.
Well, I mean,
And
3v1.
it's at this
Come
point
on.
that the legend of Wild Bill really starts to take shape. The shooting of the 3 men in Rock Creek soon became legend. And as legendary tales often are, over the years this one was embellished for dramatic effect.
Nice.
By the time the story appeared in Harper's Monthly magazine, it sounded like something out of a Sylvester Stallone film. And not one of the modern ones with acting and emotions and all that. One of those 80s films where he just machine guns everybody he meets for an hour and a half straight. In this fluffed up fable now known as the McCannells Massacre, Bill took down 10 bloodthirsty desperados with just a revolver and a knife, sustaining 11 bullet wounds and 13 knife wounds in the process.
Bro,
Shortly
what?
after the American Civil War broke out in
Yeah, a little embellished. Just a little embellished.
April 1861, Bill joined the Union Army of the North, and it was there that
They
he
really
earned
said
the
he
name
was
by
shot
which people
11
would
times.
refer to him
Like, that's so
for
great.
generations to come. So what exactly do you have to do to become known as Wild during
What,
what was
fucking 50
indisputably
Cent or
one of
something? Like-
history's craziest periods? Well, in one famous incident, Bill is said to have dispersed an angry mob intent on hanging a bartender by firing into the air and then just basically staring everyone down until they went away. No doubt that took some balls, but I suppose when you've wrestled an actual real-life bear, a few disgruntled humans hardly registers. However the name of Wild Bill came about, it stuck, which I'm sure Bill preferred to being compared to a duck. After leaving the
mean-
army in June 1865, Bill made his way to Springfield, Missouri.
Makes sense, right? I guess.
And within a month, he got involved in another shootout which would further burnish his bad boy reputation. And this one turned out to be a stone-cold Old West classic. His
Okay.
opponent was Davis Tutt, and the 2 men had fallen out over a dispute over a gambling loan.
I was about to say.
To cut a
card
long
game,
story
right?
short, Bill owed Tutt money, and when Bill failed to pay, Tutt took his prized gold pocket watch instead. Bill's pride was already wounded by this incident, and when Tutt started flaunting that watch all over town, he quickly learnt that you can't humiliate a bear-killing, sharp-shooting war veteran whose first name is Wild and expect to get away with it.
I mean,
The 2 men glanced each other across the town square, and both adopted the classic quick draw stance so familiar to us today from
the
westerns.
classic.
At this point, I like to think a tumbleweed blew across the square. A frightened saloon owner.
Honestly, one blew left, and then another one blew from right to was like one blew left to right, like this one, right, and then after that, one blew right to left behind this guy, behind the second guy.
Pulls the shutters closed, and an old prospector dropped his bottle of moonshine and got the hell out of there. Both men drew at a distance of 75 yards.
75 yards. What, dude? They're an ancient way away. That's insane.
When the dust had settled, Davis Tutt was dead. Whether or not Bill did that thing where you spin the gun on your finger before putting it back in the holster, we don't know. But let's just say that he almost definitely
No, that's
certainly
cringe.
did.
No, he
This
didn't. That's
quick
cringe.
draw shootout, now so familiar to us thanks to Hollywood, is rumoured to have been the first of its kind in history.
Wait, what?
2 days later,
The
Bill was
first? That was no shot. I mean, I'm gonna take him for his word. That's sick as fuck. That's the first, like 1v1
Tut
Wild West
was
shootout.
dead. Whether or not Bill did that thing where you spin the gun on your finger before putting it back in the holster,
Oh,
we
that's
don't
sick.
know.
That was
But let's
sick.
just say that he almost definitely certainly did. This quick draw shootout, now so familiar to us thanks to Hollywood, is rumoured to have been the first of its kind in history. 2 days later, Bill was arrested for murder, reduced to manslaughter before his trial began. It should have been an open and shut
did kill
case,
somebody.
but only 4 witnesses had actually seen the fight, and they couldn't all agree on exactly what had happened. In the end, Bill was acquitted once again, much to the horror
Let
of many,
out again.
and he left the court a free man. Several weeks later, he was interviewed by journalist George Nichols, the man credited with spreading the Wild Bill legend after he wrote an article about the gunfighter for Harper's Magazine. Now, Nichols was basically the 19th century version of Kim Jong-un's spin doctor. In the
I don't even know
article,
what
he
that
claimed
means.
Bill had killed hundreds of men,
Bro,
and
Jesus.
was such a dead-eye shot that he could put 6 bullets into a target no bigger than a human heart from 50 yards. Bill would spend the next few years working as an army scout, including working for General Custer, who achieved Old West infamy himself.
I don't even think those guns physically were accurate enough to do that, right? There's no
By
way.
leading a spectacularly unsuccessful offensive
maybe,
at the
but-
Battle of Little Bighorn, commonly known as Custer's Last Stand. Despite his, shall we say, volatile personality, it was always Bill's ambition to be on the right side of the law. And in 1869, he was elected Marshal of the city of Hayes and
Damn,
Sheriff
Bill
of
became-
Ellis County, both of which are in
Damn.
Kansas. With a badge on his chest, Bill was soon back doing what he did
Became
best,
sheriff?
making caps pop and bodies drop. In only his first month as sheriff, he really hit the ground running by killing 2 men in cold blood. And a year later, he was involved in another gunfight, wounding 1 man and killing another after they pinned him to the floor in a saloon brawl. In 1871,
Wait, they're showing like little footage. Is there like a show? There's got to be a show made after him, right?
Bill moved to
That's why they're
Abilene,
showing that?
becoming marshal once again. But it was to be his last posting as a lawman after a dispute that began with a bull's erection ended
What?
in tragedy. And yes, you did hear that correctly. The bull in question could be found on the sign of a saloon in Abilene called the Bull's Head. And it had been depicted, shall we say, standing proudly to attention, as a kind of 19th century marketing stunt cooked up by the saloon's
What?
owners, famous Old West businessman Phil Coe and renowned gunslinger Ben Thompson. Some of the townsfolk were less than happy to see this raging bull on full display in public.
Yeah, what is happening? This video
Although
turned.
I'm not sure why. Every town needs a USP, and the Abilene
video
Bull's
turned
Wang is
insane.
perfect for tempting tourists. Still, Wild Bill asked the saloon's owners to tone down their bovine pornography just a bit, and when they refused, he took the
Ain't
bull
none of
by
your
the
business,
horns,
Bill.
well, penis, and changed it anyway. The argument came to a head on October the 5th. Coe was celebrating the end of cattle season by firing off a couple of shots from his pistol. That man really had a thing for cows, didn't he? Marshal Bill was summoned to see what all the commotion was about, and Coe claimed he'd been shooting at a stray dog, which was not only legal in Abilene, it was encouraged to the point where people were given 50 cents for every stray they shot. But
Bro,
Bill was clearly
what?
skeptical because
That's
he
wild.
ordered that Coe be
So
arrested.
that means the stray dogs are running around wild.
Rather than come quietly, Coe the cow lover drew his pistols. Badge or no badge, Wild Bill was a man who met violence with violence, and in the ensuing gunfight, he shot Coe twice in the stomach. The wounds would prove fatal 3 days later. By now, Wild Bill's wicked quick draw was renowned in every town. But as many of you will already know, sometimes unloading too quickly can be a bad thing. In the confusion
That's
of the
what she
fight
said,
with
boy.
Coe, Bill's deputy had rushed in to help, but Bill mistook the man for an attacker, and thanks to those rapid reflexes of his, He shot and killed his brave colleague before he even knew what he was doing.
Damn,
Bill was,
man.
understandably, stripped of his position as marshal, and he left Abilene shortly afterwards.
That
This
sucks.
act of manslaughter is said to have haunted him for the rest of his days,
That
and
rooster's
he was
so
never
annoying.
involved in another gunfight
That's fucked up, man. What a
for as long as
shitty
he
end.
lived. After such a tragedy, an attempted career in showbiz might seem like an unlikely next step. But in a
Dude,
life as bizarre as
what?
Bill's,
No
you shouldn't
shot,
rule anything
Bill.
out. In 1873, he was approached by that plucky scout he'd met in his younger days, William Cody, who'd spent the intervening years forging a legend of his own, and was now touring with Wild West-themed shows as Buffalo Bill. Bill, Buffalo, asked Bill, Wild, if he'd like to join him and the equally awesomely named Texas Jack Alejandro in a production called The Scouts of the Prairie. Wild Bill agreed, but it turned out he wasn't really made for the limelight. And when I say not made for the limelight, what I really mean is that he used to hide behind the scenery and once responded to a spotlight being shone on him by shooting it off the ceiling. Yeah, he left after only a few months. He
Yeah, I
drifted for a
bet.
few years,
Jesus.
plagued by deteriorating eyesight and with little money to his name. Not that it was all doom and gloom. It was around this time he met the woman he'd eventually marry. Agnes
he
Thatcher
settled
Lake
down?
had lived a life every bit as exciting as Bill's. She was a former tightrope walker whose first husband ran a circus. When he'd been shot and killed whilst
so he
ejecting
was
a
a clown.
customer from the big top, Agnes had taken over the business. She was over a decade older than Bill and already had a daughter, but the two must have felt like kindred spirits and they married
Dude,
in
it's so crazy how like the circus was probably such a big thing back then, man.
March 1876.
Compared to now, it's like, dude, who the fuck runs a circus nowadays? I don't think there's one. There's got to be a negative amount of circuses ran.
Though Bill left Agnes not long afterwards to try and make his fortune looking for gold in South Dakota.
Damn,
Say
he
what you
left
want
her
about
to
the
go
man, he bloody
gold
loved an
panning,
adventure.
man.
But like all adventures, Bill's had to come to an
Makes
end
sense, I guess.
sometime, and it was in the aptly named town of Deadwood that he penned his final chapter.
Damn,
On the 1st of
Deadwood.
August 1876, he was playing poker in Nutterland Man's famous saloon when he was shot in the back of the head by fellow gambler Jack McCall, who'd lost heavily to Bill in a poker game the day before. Bill was shot at point-blank range, and the bullet passed through his skull and hit one of the other players in the arm, proving that even in death he was a
Jesus.
danger to others. The hand of cards
I can't
Bill
believe
held
that
when
even
he
in
died
death.
was a pair of aces and a pair of eights, all black.
There's no shot he had a pair of aces, dude.
And this has since become known as the dead man's hand. In the
Pair of
century and a
aces and a
half since
pair
Bill
of
died, there have been numerous
eights,
books
all
written about
black.
him, and he's
Wow.
been portrayed many times over in films and TV. It seems no matter what else changes, we still love our cowboys wild, and Wild Bill was surely the wildest of them all.
Dude, that was sick.
Thanks for watching.
That was actually sick as fuck, man. Yeah, well, hey, make sure to go subscribe to, Thoughty2 for that fucking great video, man. Yeah, final thoughts. That was fucking cool. It's pretty interesting, too, man. Goddamn.